Parents of Reddit, in what ways have you almost accidentally killed your children? My son is only 8 months old, and I've already got one. First, you should know that our house is about 100 years old and still has a boiler and radiators, steam, to provide heat. Since the house has settled, not all of the radiator pipes are angled as they should be. This can cause cold air to get trapped in the pipe, preventing certain radiators from heating up. The way to fix this is to remove the pressure regulator from the end of the radiator until steam comes out. This can take up to 10 minutes, depending on how long the boiler has been running, and the distance between said radiator and boiler. One day, the radiator in my son's room wasn't warming. It was nighttime and cold as hell outside, so I snuck into his room and unscrewed the regulator. Not wanting to wake him, I snuck back out, planning to return momentarily and put the regulator back on. Well, I forgot. For about half an hour. All of a sudden, as I'm doing who knows what downstairs, I'm wondering what the high-pitched whistling noise coming from upstairs is. I quickly realize my mistake and dash to his room, only to find a cloud of steam so dense that I can't see anything. I feel my way to his crib and give him the scare of his very short life as I jerk him up out of a dead sleep and run out of the room. He was no worse for wear, just generally damp from the ridiculous amount of water in the air. After tending to him, I had to manually shut off the boiler and wait for the radiator to cool down before I could put the regulator back on, then towel dry everything in his room, even the walls and ceiling. 1995. My wife is 7 months pregnant with our first, punches me awake at 3 AM crying because, well, hormones. She's hysterical because we can't be trusted with a baby, we'll hurt it. When I tell her we'll be fine, she says you're a fucking klutz, you'll drop the baby down the stairs. 2003, carrying our 8-month-old third child down the stairs. One of the other kids had left one of those fat crayons on like the second step down. Step on crayon, foot goes shooting straight forward, I land hard on my ass. Baby gets dropped and lands 2 steps down from me. I had landed oddly, with my left leg sort of tucked backwards, ended up with a sprained knee from it. I try to free my leg so that I can reach forward and grab my daughter. Leg pops forward, and I managed to kick my daughter down another 5 steps. For the record, she was scared as hell but completely unharmed. She stopped crying within 10 minutes and went on as if nothing had happened. I'm not a parent, but once, driving a 5-year-old around, in the middle of the road he unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed out of the window. I noticed when his body was dangling halfway out of the car, was barely able to grab him by the leg and pull him back in. My heart had stopped. You avert your eyes for a split second and these kids find a way to lemming themselves. Once while watching a 3-year-old, my godson, we went to a local model train store that he loved. Everything went great, and he had a lot of fun. Walking back to the car, he was tugging at my hand and said I want to run. We'd made it past the last car in the lot except ours, no visible moving cars anywhere ahead of us, and it looked like absolute clear, safe sailing all the way back to our parked car. So, I let go and said, go ahead, run. It all seems so predictable now. He ran about 5 feet forward into the completely empty parking lot, towards our car, then did a 180-degree turn with a speed and agility that would make a hummingbird proud, and took off back the way we came, back into the busy part of the parking lot. Trust me when I tell you that it is simply not possible for a 185-pound adult to change direction that quickly. Fortunately, I still had the presence of mind to yell stop at the top of my lungs. He stopped himself just short of a big SUV with its backup lights on. I think the driver may have seen him. I don't know. Anyway, here's what I learned about small kids. Just because traveling in a certain direction is obvious and natural to you does not mean your toddler thinks the same thing. All directions of travel are on the table. Toddlers can maneuver much more quickly than you can. You need to be holding your toddler's hand firmly any place there are cars. Even cars that could never ever be a source of danger, because they still can be. Grandma was visiting and doing some knitting. No sooner had the request please make sure your 3-year-old grandson can't get a hold of one of those come out of my mouth when I see him racing around the sofa brandishing a knitting needle. Time goes into slow motion. I can't see him and my legs, strangely, won't move fast enough. There is an odd silence. Then the crying. But it is a cry I've not heard before. It's gargled somehow, rounding the sofa. It's a scene for which I have no context. My son is sprawled on the ground. My brain first registers the blood, and then the bloody knitting needle. I turn him over, and blood begins spurting from his neck and hits the coffee table. Grab PJ top and apply pressure. Scream at grandma to call 911. Grandma forgets how to use this crazy telephone. Husband runs in from garden. A blur of ambulance, attendants, neck brace, gurney, sirens, emergency room. There are ultrasounds, physical checks, stitches, monitors, and finally an overpass stay in hospital for observation. All is well. Arriving home, grandma said she thought we overreacted. Much later she will be heard to wonder aloud why she is not allowed to babysit. My kiddo was / is a tummy sleeper through and through. I kept telling the doctor she wouldn't sleep on her back, but he just kept telling us that she will die if she sleeps on her belly. So I had a sleep deprived, miserable crying child, and I was sleep deprived and miserable from holding her while she took 3 naps a day. We couldn't co-sleep, so something had to give. If we put her on her belly, she slept like a champ, so that's what we did at night. Everything was great, though I felt guilty. Until one morning I go to wake her up, and she doesn't move. When I call her name, she doesn't move. When I lay a hand on her back, she is stiff. When I yank her out of bed and proceed to run screaming bloody murder throughout the house, she's dead. She's dead, OMG, she's dead. I don't know whether to jump in the car and go to the hospital 2 seconds away or call 911. So I'm frantically dancing back and forth in the front yard. My panicked husband finally yells stop for a second, walks over and kisses a super quiet, very confused and very alive child. I told you, she slept like a champ on her belly. We were renting a 2-story house when my son was about 2 years old. All of the bedrooms were upstairs and the windows, which lead out to an overhang, were the floor to ceiling type and opened on the bottom. I thought I was being safe by putting child-proof locks in the kids' room windows. One day I'm downstairs while my son is napping, and a neighbor comes over screaming, "There's a baby on your roof." He had gone into my bedroom and climbed out a window that wasn't locked. I was driving to work one winter morning in South Dakota. It was very cold out. My mind was elsewhere, and when I was turning into the parking lot, I heard my 4-month-old daughter cough in the backseat. I had forgotten she was in the car and had forgotten to drop her off at daycare. I was this close to parking the car and going into the office and leaving her there in a South Dakota winter. She wouldn't have made it to lunch. Still gives me the creeps. 12 years later. No kids, but as a babysitter, during the summer, the parents would drop me off with the kids at a swim club they were members at. Oldest kid was maybe 7, youngest was 3. Since the youngest couldn't swim yet, she had those inflatable arm floaty things to wear. Well, at the end of the day, I was packing everything up to get ready to leave, took her arm floaties off, turned to put them in the bag, turned back around, she's gone. No more than 15 seconds with my back turned. Apparently she decided to jump back in the pool for one last swim. There is nothing quite as heart attack inducing as when I looked in the shallow end of the pool, and there she was just standing on the bottom with this shocked look on her face, since she had expected to float. I jumped right in and pulled her out. Again, she was only out of sight for maybe 15 seconds, so no harm done. But still, scary as hell. Not a parent, but my sister took care of me a lot when I was a baby. One day I was playing in the laundry room and happened to get a hold of one of the silica packets from a shoebox. According to my sister, I somehow got it open and ate half the packet while she was in her room. After she found out, she was scared shitless and couldn't tell my parents. So she didn't, and just watched me closely for the rest of the day, seeing if I did anything weird. Happy to say, I didn't die. TLDR, baby eats silica packet, sister too scared to tell anyone, so waits it out. Accidents absolutely can and do happen to normal, responsible people. When my son was 4 months old, his dad was carrying him downstairs. His dad sneezed, lost his footing, and slid halfway down the stairs on his butt. In the meantime, my son, swaddled tightly in a blanket sound asleep, shot out of his arms like a football and landed headfirst on the wood landing of the stairs. He ended up in PICU with a hematoma and 2 fractures on his skull. After a couple weeks of monitoring and healing, he was fine, and is fine to this day, although I worry about early head trauma affecting him later in life. But so far so good. His dad on the other hand still tears up when he thinks or talks about it. Best story happened to me. I was in my walker, dad left the garage door open. Bam, down a flight of concrete stairs. Ambulance and fire truck come, and I'm off to the hospital. Well, parents were in the middle of cooking dinner. Grandma came over to finish dinner, started a royal fire, and caught house on fire, which took out about a 1/3 of the house. Bam, same fire truck and ambulance. Then after they leave, grandma has a heart attack, and you guessed it, same fire truck and ambulance, 3 trips to my house in less than 5 hours. PS, grandma made it. Well, she is dead now, but made it through the heart attack. Single mom here. I had this fake fireplace the first place that we lived, and I didn't know I had to bolt it to the wall. I figured it was heavy enough it would be fine. My 2-year-old son threw a ball, and it went on top of the fireplace. As he climbed up to get it, the whole thing fell over. The only thing that saved his life was the beanbag chair we had set in front for story time. The fireplace weighted 200 pounds or more. When it tilted, he managed to get into the nook part, so he wasn't getting completely crushed, and the chair kept the weight off of him. I had to get neighbors to help me lift it up. Scariest moment so far. The closest my son has ever come to danger was with my mom. I was there. This was mom's fault. We were loading purchases into the back of the car outside a department store. He was a little over a year old and was strapped into the seat of the shopping cart. I went around to turn on the car and get the act going. My mom let go of the shopping cart to put her purse in and close the trunk. I stand up to see my son in the shopping cart rolling at a pretty good clip down the hill through the parking lot towards the 4-lane highway. He saw me looking, lifted a hand, and did that cute bending your fingers wave kids do. You have never seen 2 women take off running so fast. He is a teenager now, and anytime my mom criticizes me, I remind her of the time she sent him careening towards traffic. 2 weeks ago I fell asleep behind the wheel. I was driving 160 km/h with my 2-year-old son sleeping in the backseat. I was tired, but I thought I could just keep driving. Wrong. I nodded off for just 1 second, but the car started going to the right, onto the emergency lane. Scared the shit out of me. I stopped at the first gas station and closed my eyes for half an hour. I got home safely after that. I promised myself and my son that I will never keep driving when tired. It's better to take a break and continue later. When I was only 6 months old, my mom was running errands and had me in the car seat in back of the Jeep Wrangler we had. She buckled me into my car seat, but she was absent-minded/distracted and forgot to strap the car seat to the back seat. She's driving along and takes a turn too fast, and I shift from right side up on the passenger side to upside down in between the back of the driver's seat and the back seat driver's side. She notices right away, pulls over to get me right side up again, and she notices that my soft spot was about an inch from a protruding bolt. I don't think she forgot to secure the car seat after that. TL, doctor almost got my soft spot penetrated. My sister had her fair share of near misses as a baby. On the other hand, myself as the eldest sister had no accidents. She fell off the kitchen counter one time. Her x-ray with the dummy in was adorable. She swallowed a balloon. It did eventually surface. She gave herself a hefty dose of Calpol. No idea how she got into the cap. She chewed the cap off some bleach and had a taste. Plus, she had a penchant for playing with the dead prey my cat brought back, putting mice in pushchairs and kissing dead blue tits. Although not really dangerous in a deadly way, I guess she cold got quite sick. I recently watched a program about a girl who, at 2 years old, survived 90% burns to her body because the mother left a lit cigarette in her room. When my daughter was 7 weeks old, I was returning from a local coffee shop with drinks for me and my husband. I was pushing our daughter in her infant car seat atop the stroller that came with it. I sat the car seat down on our couch and unbuckled her, then turned to take off my shoes and set down the drinks. in the blink of an eye, and before I could get to her, the seat tipped over off the couch and my baby fell face first onto the hardwood floor with a sickening thud. She began to scream and cry, and I was doing the same. I remember yelling, "Oh my god, my baby, my baby." We ended up rushing her to the local children's hospital where she received dozens of x-rays and ended up having to spend the night to monitor her. She had a fractured eye socket that healed on its own. I was a hysterical mess and, 4 years later, have not really forgiven myself for being so careless. This will be buried, but I'll tell it anyway. One night in the early 90s, my parents were cooking popcorn. Not popcorn in a microwave, like civilized human beings, but popcorn on the stove, like savages. As we all learned from Scream, this type of popcorn has a tendency to catch on fire, and so it does just that. We look up, and suddenly there are flames shooting up from our delicious evening snack. My sister freaks out a little. She's crying and screaming, and just generally losing it, as 6-year-olds tend to do, after getting fire safety education in school. My dad calmly walks over to the stove, and puts the lid on the pan. My dad's all, "Don't worry, it's out now." My sister is still freaking out and not convinced. I mean, the man didn't put water on it, or break out the fire extinguisher or anything. But my dad insists it's fine, and tells her to come over, and look at the pan. She hesitantly walks over. Dad puts the pan right under her face, so she can see the fire is gone. He removes the lid with a flourish, like he's revealing the exquisite main entree to a 5-course meal. And the fire hadn't been smothered yet. The flames re-explode right in my sister's face. Singed her eyebrows right off. She still has some trust issues. When my brother was about 3, my dad was playing that game where you lift your kid above your head repeatedly over and over again. He didn't realize that there was a ceiling fan directly above him, and put my brother's head into a very fast moving ceiling fan. This resulted in a bunch of stitches and a very guilty father.